Hey guys, and welcome back to Life But Make It Business, hosted by me, Mee and Shannon. I met Shannon in the William Mary Flex MBA program, and I'm here to improve our family's business, which is a martial arts school. And I really found that a lot of what we learn is by talking to a lot of people. So that's why we made this podcast where we talk to professionals about things they've learned that both apply to life and business. And here's Shannon.
And I'm Shannon. I'm also in the MBA program at William and Mary. I'm a project manager, program manager, jack of all trades for a consulting company out of DC. I work on a lot of government contracts, and I'm here to talk with our guest, Briget with Sang Mee, about her journey from nursing to IT healthcare management, program management, and her path through all of those changes in career and how it's played off of her life and all of those things. So welcome, Briget, to Life But Make It Business. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Shannon. I'm happy to be here.
I saw you're also a professional health and life coach.
Yes.
Right? In addition to all those other things. So,
yes.
We're very interested to hear about your background in that, as well as, your experience with the IT and health, because we were talking about beforehand, you were right on that cutting edge, right? You said you were the first one to get, what was that degree in again?
It's board certification in nursing informatics.
Oh my gosh.
And that was when it first came out. And there were several nurses that went for it, but I was in that group that initially did it. It was fantastic.
That's awesome.
So what is that? Can you tell us a little bit about what it is? And when you were there, how did you find out about it?
Right.
How did a boss say to you, hey, there's this thing coming out, or did you just find out about it and say, I'm going to go for this?
Right. It's fascinating because at that point, I was in nursing administration, and I had been in nursing administration in 2 different hospitals. And from there, I had done something called staff development, where you train the nursing staff. And then one of my managers said, Briget, there's a new board certification that's coming out in nursing informatics. And that's essentially, in a nutshell, where caring and technology meet. And we were at the cutting edge in that small community hospital, where we were going from the paper medical record to the electronic medical record, which at the time, believe it or not, people didn't want to do that. They wanted to hold on to that paper. And
I believe it.
We needed to convince them that, oh no, there is a better way. And for the doctors, for example, I was able to put the entire instructions for working in the electronic record into a little business card that they could put in their pocket. And then we were able to do different views for them depending on their specialty. So if they were a cardiologist or a urologist or what have you, they would see all of the lab values and everything else that they needed to see for their particular patients. So that was coming out. And we also were doing everything electronic. So that's where the computers on wheels came from. We were on the cutting edge of that also, and how that fit into nursing care. And it's where the IT department and nursing had to come together. And they're 2 different things.
Yeah.
Right? So I started the order entry and the patient care system and helped the hospital wean off of paper to the electronic record.
I forgot to tell you, I actually was an EMT for a bit in college.
Oh,
and
great.
I remember we got so frustrated because you've written out your report and then you had to put it all back in the computer. And how did you deal with that pushback, right? Where they're like, it's already written down, why do I got to do it on computer? And then certain things I think you really want to have it right away, on paper. So, how did you work with people on that?
Right. I'll tell you, the main thing, and this was the huge lesson learned that I learned from the entire process, was all of us naturally fear any change.
Mhm.
It's just how we're designed. And if you give people advance notice and you continuously let them know what's coming, then by the time it gets there, they've already sort of adjusted mentally that, yes, it's going to be a new change. And then there's got to be something in it for them. Is it going to save them time? Is it going to save them energy? Are they going to be able to spend more time with their patients? That at the end of the day, that's what you want to be able to do. Take care of the documentation, have it written in a way that people can actually read it very easily, and that's great. But to Sang-Mi, with, I guess you would call it double, writing your, let's say your vital signs, your temp, pulse, respiration, blood pressure on a piece of paper, and then having to put it into the computer. We were at the very beginning of that. So all of the nursing notes, doctor's notes, dietary, social work, the emergency room, everyone was able to write notes, but then the vitals and everything else you would have to kind of take and then put in. Of the devices themselves, I believe. It's been a while since I've done it, but that was the direction we were heading. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. I really like that. Good advice about like that people don't like change and that you adjust by having that advance notice. That's a really good lesson. Like, did you think you learned it then, or like you had it in your back pocket from previous leadership experiences?
It was a little of both, and I could see kind of the fear in people's eyes because we weren't an electronic world, and we had just gotten, our phones, right? And it was the flip phone, and we were doing all of these kinds of things, and it was a little scary. And then I also felt that anyone that was over the age of 40 was really scared because they had never seen anything like this.
Right.
And I had a team of people that worked with them one-on-one. And then that way, anything that came up for them, we could talk about it, review it, practice it. And then they were feeling a little bit better about the whole situation. But I had buttons made up, and it was, online or bust, all kinds of things. And we had flyers that were put in, every place you could possibly think. And it was, that it was coming,
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Insane.
It was very interesting, but it has to be a coordinated effort, and you have to be exceptionally organized for it to roll out.
Yeah. Would you say that you hit a lot of roadblocks? And I'm thinking of the time period because you said flip phones and things. I'm thinking late 90s, early 2000s. Is that approximately?
Exactly.
And I'm also thinking of kind of the consolidation project that happened with the FBI, which was kind of a similar thing, moving, from analog to digital, and it just failed epically. Do you feel like there was any point where you were teetering on the edge of kind of this widespread implementation of like, oh, this might not go? Or do you think that you had planned it out and had it kind of together in the beginning so that it was pretty smooth?
I can tell you that the organization of it, the project management of it, is significant. It takes a lot of time. It takes patience. And then the coordination part I found was making sure people had the tools and the education they needed. Once they had that and they could understand that part, then it made it a lot easier. So for example, I would take my entire team for the order entry, which is where you put the orders in for, labs and that kind of thing. And then the patient care system, which was all of the notes that you would handwrite in a record. I took all of those people with me to Boston, and that's where the company was. And then we would have days of education on just how this worked. And I think that was incredible. And then at the same time, what we did was, like you were saying, Shannon, that time frame, late 90s, early 2000s, we were also in a different phase in healthcare where we were, the architecture was something very important, and being closer to the patient was really important. So we not only looked at the information technology, we also looked at the architecture around our patients. For example, we made sure when patients came down the hall when they were in a stretcher, we didn't want them to see all those bright, bright lights up above. So we had these softer lights put on the walls as they went down. Then we had carpeting so that it was quiet. Then we made sure that when you went down the hallway, it was free of any kind of crash carts or med carts or anything just hanging out there. We created space to put those things. We had social workers, lab technicians, nurses, doctors, physical therapists all come into a room that was modeled after a patient room. And we said, for your specialty, what do you need to get your job done? And they would say, you know, if they were the lab tech, for example, they would say, well, I want this table so that I can put my blood samples, you know, and everything else on the table, but then move it away. So it's out of the patient's way so that I have it when I need it. And then the physical therapist said, well, I need lots of room because I have wheelchairs and I need to be able to get the patient, you know, into the bathroom, into a shower, you know, so all of those things were just taken into account all at the same time as rolling out the technology to accommodate that patient experience. And then we looked at the nurses station and we said, why is there a big, almost like a
wall,
right? And it's, you know, about this tall. And then the nurse is down there and you're saying, you know, I want to talk to you about my mother or father. And we got rid of that. And then we had almost like dining room table style where you could sit and talk with the nurse or the doctor or the social worker. And we had 24-hour meals. And, you know, it was a fantastic time. It was a fantastic time. And it incorporated everything.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it's such a good example of involving every possible stakeholder.
Yes.
Getting just their information, you know, because I think, like you said, the fear and the not knowing what's going to happen to your job or what's going to change, you can alleviate that so simply by bringing them into the conversation.
Right.
Tell me what you think.
Yes.
And then they say, oh, I do have a voice and you're listening to me and it'll, you know, I'm a part of this now. And
that's right. That's right. You know, even from my standpoint, I was thinking, well, when we are at the nurses station, and I was thinking with my nursing eyes, you know, how close do I need to be to the next nurse who's documenting electronically now? Because we're not doing it on paper. And then, you know, you'd make cutouts with cardboard the size of a computer and make sure that it was spaced just so, you know, what are the chairs that nurses have to sit in? You know, the average age of a nurse at that point, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, was about 44 years old. And I was coming in, having them use computers on wheels. And I thought, okay, well, they're going to have to be bending a lot to plug that in. So we made sure that all of the plugs were at waist level so they could do this.
Easier.
It was easier on their backs. And, you know, you have to think of those things. Yeah. So little details mean a lot.
They do.
They mean a lot. Yeah. And there was a whole system. It was called the Peachtree system. And it was developed by a patient actually who was in the hospital who had had a stroke. And that patient wasn't able to move themselves. And they talked about their experience from that standpoint. And then they came up with the Peachtree kind of methodology. And then our hospital adopted that. And it made all the difference, all the difference. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's really, those are some good life and business lessons right there. Just like, you gotta get all the stakeholders involved. You gotta look out for small details.
Yes.
That's what I love about like business school, right? Is you learn these things and some of them are really common sense, but you don't really think about it as something. So I don't know. I don't know if it's common sense
Mm-hmm.
or people just, how do you feel about that? Do you feel like this is something that people kind of experience and learn, or is something that everyone should know, but they just don't?
Right. And it's almost a business philosophy and a personal philosophy and how you are as a leader. And probably because I had 5 other siblings, I have a democratic leadership style. And I guess if I didn't, and if my brothers and sisters didn't, by the time the milk was passed on to me, there wouldn't have been anything left in the bottle if we weren't democratic. Let everyone have their share, right? But I've always believed in involving the people that are closest to the process in on it, because I can't read their minds of what goes on day in and day out. And they are the stakeholders. And their voices are so important. They're vital. And that experience for me kind of changed the whole trajectory of how I managed. And an example is, so this was during that time frame in the 2000s. And then we went from, in IT, we went from something called a waterfall methodology to Agile. And I'm sure you're familiar with Agile. And so that's, really something where you do involve all the stakeholders all at one time.
Yep.
And what I did, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I actually don't know what waterfall and agile is. Can you like kind of?
Sure. Yeah. And they were just different methodologies. And it was a way of doing your work in the software development world. And with business requirements you would have for the software, and you would make sure that you followed all of the business requirements and so on. And then there's an agile methodology that is something that's a lot quicker, where you work with the product manager, product owner, and you find out specifically from them, what do they want to see? And then you have all the people involved in the development process in the room at that time, and you figure out what you have to do to get from A to B so that you can get that software out on time and on budget. It's kind of a short way of saying it. But at any rate, one of the things that I also did was I held, when I worked at General Dynamics, I had the managers that had specific teams for different software, healthcare software that they were testing. And then I had the deployment coordinators, and they were the ones that would make sure that the software was ready when the managers and their teams were ready to test that particular software. Well, I used to have just meetings with my managers, and I thought, that's kind of silly. The deployment coordinators work with the other IT department, and they know if things are going to be running late. They know when there's going to be a maintenance weekend and things have to be fixed. Their information was vital. So I would have 15-minute Scrum meetings in the morning and just say, okay, we have 15 minutes. It's stand up. You don't sit down. Don't get too comfortable, and stand up. And within that period of time, it was, I think 10 people I had. It was, okay, what are you doing today? Are there any roadblocks? And essentially, what can I do to make you successful today, right now? And if there were any roadblocks whatsoever, that was my job. Get that out of the way so that that team could get running. And I'll tell you, that saved hundreds of hours in those 15 minutes.
Yeah, we do a waterfall methodology, but we do this weird mix kind of where we do a lot of stand-ups as well. So I can see the value in that. Did you feel any pushback when you were transitioning from a waterfall to an agile, or were you able to come in and just do a clean agile implementation?
Right. It's a great question because once again, change. The
I'm
fear
afraid, yeah.
factor comes into play, and it was the people that were the waterfall methodology folks who had grown up in that were like, no, agile will never work. It can't. It
Mhm.
cuts out too much. You need all this information. And then it was like, well, let's give this a chance and let's see what we can do to improve it. But I'll tell you, one of the other things that I found that was significant was, as a leader, it's important to find out the strengths of your entire team. And you can find out so easily just sitting in a meeting. Watch where they sit when they come in the room. Are they sitting in the chair that's not connected to the table and it's against the wall? Are they sitting next to you? Are they sitting across from you? Like, where are they sitting and what are they volunteering for?
Mhm.
And if they love to do highly technical things, they're raising their hand constantly. Oh, I can do that. Let me do that. And then there's other people that, let's say, don't want to do highly automated testing, but they do want to do testing that you go in and you physically look at the screen, at the algorithms, and you make sure that, let's say on a report, that column A plus B equals column C. You do all the math and all of that. And you see where people's comfort level is. And what I would do is I always went to their strengths. I needed people that methodically would go through things. And I also needed people that could save time, that could take some records and automate them, where when we were doing them individually, maybe it took 2 hours, but when we automated it, it took 7 minutes.
Yep.
Those types of things. And you need both people. And one example is I had a employee and he loved to train new people. Loved it. And I needed a trainer, really. I didn't have a position for it, but that's what I needed because I had new people coming in. And I created an entire role for him and he loved it. And then another thing I found that was really helpful was, at one point I had to hire 6 or 8 people. And instead of keeping them in their own individual offices and then sending someone to train them individually, I found a room where they all could be, all the new people, and they set up their computers. And then I just needed that one person and he went in.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a game changer because it served 2 purposes. One, it just made him light up. Number 2, the new people became closer to their colleagues. And then what one had a strength in, the other one didn't, they would help them along. So it worked out beautifully. And in satisfaction surveys, they would always state that that was the one thing that they loved when they came on board.
That's such a great idea. Creating that kind of cohort is so critical to establishing culture and all of those things,
Yes.
I loved organizational behavior. One of the first classes that we took, huge into that. So that's amazing.
Yes.
Foster that teamwork when you didn't have that sort of opportunity. Aside from letting people play to their strengths, were there any times where, you have someone who loves to be a teacher, but you don't have any teaching things for them to do? How do you keep them integrated with the team?
Right. And it's not so much that you have to find something for every person, for every strength, right? But you do find things that sort of go in that direction. And for that person, for example, I would say, we need an orientation program. I would love for you to help me with the orientation manual. And that teacher person would love that.
Yeah.
And in every role I've ever had in all of these years, I have always created an orientation manual because I knew what it felt like to come on board and have nothing and have to start from scratch. And I didn't want anyone to have to do that.
Yeah, it sounds like you used a lot of your experiences to fuel a very positive mindset. I definitely noticed that throughout
Always.
the talk today. Like you're just very like, you know, a lot of, unfortunately, you know, as in my time as EMT, a lot of the nurses and EMTs I knew were pretty jaded. You know, healthcare, especially the coronavirus, you know,
It's rough.
Yeah. And that's exhaustion speaking. Yeah. Yeah. But one of the things when I worked in another small community hospital, one of the things that I did there was I was the quality assurance director for the entire hospital. And that meant that I had to collaborate with every single department in the hospital. And that's really cool because you get to know everyone.
All the stuff.
Everyone, right? And one of the things I thought would be helpful was to say, how can we make this a better environment to come into as a patient? And there was a woman in the medical records department. And I said, you know what? Let's make a video of what it would be like to come in as a patient when it's welcoming. And then what would it be like to come in as a patient that you wouldn't want to see? So let's flip that. Instead of patient satisfaction, let's look at patient dissatisfaction. What makes you dissatisfied? And she said, oh, I've got an idea. And I said, I do too. So we got out these JVC video cameras that had just come out. And we went into the medical records department at lunchtime. And I came dressed up as an old woman with gray hair and, you know, this big dress and all of this. And I was the patient. And then she was the person that would take your insurance information. And it was really, really kind of cool because we did the what not to do and what to do. So the what not to do was don't give them any eye contact. Don't give them eye contact. And then when they're talking, just do this. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The opposite of an etiquette book.
Yes, the complete opposite. And then how would you feel? How does that make you feel? And then we would roll the tape again and then have the beautiful eye contact and then giving all of your attention to that person, making sure that they never left that seat without having all of their questions answered. And it made such a difference. It truly did.
I think it's so funny when you mentioned that kind of training video type of environment. I worked in corporate restaurants and of course we had training videos just like that. But I had never, and I guess maybe not never, but I hadn't thought of how that could apply to, you know, going back to what Sang-Mi said, are these things that you know, or some people do, you know, how could even something like that apply in a corporate setting?
Right.
I mean, imagine how much help that could be for some people who maybe don't have the best, for this conversation, bedside manner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a, you know, thing throughout.
Yeah, yeah. And that just comes from, I think, modeling and how you treat others. And if you treat others with dignity and respect, people are watching you. They're watching you when you're in a meeting. They're watching you when you're walking to the cafeteria. They're watching you when you greet a new employee. They're watching and they're taking mental notes, and you'd be surprised how they will try to emulate your behavior. And it goes a long way. It goes a long way. Yeah. And then even in the corporate environment, Shannon, one of the things that I find is so important is how you spend your time in meetings. You'd be surprised how many people do not know how to run an effective meeting. And my experience with working with the military was you start and you end on time, period. And I would always let my staff know, I will not hold you here 1 minute after 11 o'clock. If there's something else that needs to be discussed, we'll hold it for the next meeting. You know, let people know what you're going to discuss. Have a time-driven agenda. If it's a topic, you've got 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. That's it. If it takes more than that, we move it. Yeah.
We did have a regular class that I'll say when I started working at an installation that started right at 1:30 or 13:30, and they locked the doors. And if a soldier missed the class, if you got there, they would not open the door. They said this is when it started. So you would frequently see them in their cars in the parking lot eating lunch so that they would not miss this class, and it was, and I remember thinking that's so harsh, but the guys, explained it and said it's about mutual respect for each other's time and space, and we've got to get this done. And if this guy's late or this guy has a phone call in class or, in a meeting, they'll stop the meeting and say, I'm sorry, if you need to take that, you can step out, and it seems really harsh in our other world lives, but it is about a mutual respect.
Yes, it is. And then even if you're the leader of that meeting, making sure that you let them out a few minutes early so that they can go across campus or where have you for that next meeting.
My goodness, you really have a lot of stuff together. Do you ever have any moments where you were like, I do not have my stuff together? Like this is
yes. And it's not a good feeling. And then you prepare for the next time. And, having failures or not being at the top of your game, those are the biggest things that teach you so much. And then you're so much better the next time around. So much better. Yeah.
My goodness. And we never really went over how you went from nursing to getting your MBA. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, Sang-Mi. Let's see. I had gotten my nursing degree. I was a registered nurse and I went to a baccalaureate program. So I got my BSN 4-year program. And then after that, I got married and had 2 beautiful daughters. And we wanted to send our daughters to a private school for high school. And I recognized that in order for us to do that, we had to bring in more income. And I decided that I had a choice to either get my master's in nursing or get it as an MBA. And I was kind of on the fence. And my rationale for getting my MBA was that I could be more marketable, that I would have that behind me. So I got my MBA when I was about, I think I was 30, in my mid 30s, I believe. It was like 1995 to 1997. And what's interesting is I was at that small community hospital, and this woman came to talk to the hospital, the nursing home, and home health, because I was involved with all 3. And she came to talk to us and said, I want to talk to you about an MBA program. And we were all like, oh, we would love to do an MBA program, but we can't afford it, right this second. And computers, laptops were just coming out. They were in black and white, right? And I said, well, I don't have a laptop computer and I don't have a printer. That's why I can't do it. And she said, oh, well, what if I told you I'd give you a laptop computer and I'll give you a printer and you keep it if you graduate.
Nice.
I said, oh, okay. And then I said, well, I don't have a lot of time. I have 2 children in school and I don't think I could do this. And she said, well, what if I told you it was an accelerated program and you could do it in 18 months? And I said, oh, okay. And then I said, oh, but the school is in Danville, Virginia, and I live in Warrenton. And she said, well, What if it was at a satellite program at an Army base and you went with people with the Army, you know? And I thought, okay. And then I said, well, I don't have the money. Well, what if, you know, you could get, you know, loans and all this.
Wow.
So I was there. The manager from home health was there. The manager from the nursing home was there. The manager from PR was there, and one of my assistants. And we all decided to get our MBA. And it was only 10 minutes away. And half of our class was in the Army, Shannon and Singmei, and the other half were civilians. And that was a great experience because our worlds were so different. And like I said earlier, I learned all about a matrix. I learned the absolute importance of starting and ending meetings on time and knowing that you say what you mean what you say, period. And that helped me a lot. And this is a long way of saying why I got my MBA, but I did feel that the MBA assisted me in a more direct way where I had other options, because as an RN, it's not only clinical nursing, but we're in healthcare, we're in insurance, we're in law, we're in policy making, you name it, we're there. So that's what I did.
That's so great. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, you definitely learn a lot, not just from the program, but from your classmates.
Yes. Oh, that's where you learn the most. And I'll never forget my graduation. They handed me my diploma, and my daughters were like 9 and 10 at the time. And my oldest daughter said, "Mommy, I didn't realize you had to do all that work for a MasterCard." Oh,
Oh no.
yes, honey. Yeah, that was cute.
Oh my gosh. I do have a random question for you. This is something we do in our podcast that's, it's totally not related to anything business. But your random question today is, would you rather travel back in time to meet your ancestors or to the future to meet your descendants?
That's a great question.
I thought that so too. I'm like, I don't know what I would pick.
Right. And
But
that's
you share. So
yeah. And I think I would like to go back and meet my descendants and find out what they went through, because I think there's a lot to be said for that experience and how it actually impacts you in today's world, how you function, how you think.
Right.
Yeah, your ancestors. So I think that's what I'd do. Yeah.
Okay. Do you know much about your lineage?
And that's why I say that, because I don't. And we used to joke that instead of a family tree, we had a family twig because I didn't know. I only met my one grandfather once on my father's side. Never met my other grandparents. So it kind of ended right there, and to meet them and to see what they went through and to see how they all went through the pandemic 100 years ago. That would be cool to see that too. Yeah. But I think earlier you had asked me about the life coaching. Yeah, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. I think I'm a little bit behind you actually, on my internet is a little unstable.
Oh, okay.
But I would love to hear about the health coaching and how that interacts with and supports what you do now.
Right. Well, I had decided later in my career that I wanted to become a life coach and a health coach. So I pursued that, and I never realized how great that was to be a life coach and a manager at the same time. It helped me immensely in dealing with any kind of conflicts with fellow employees. And at one point at General Dynamics, I had 70 employees, and that's a lot to work with and to make sure that things are running smoothly. And the way that you do that is to make sure that you can confront whatever issue is there and deal with it and give people the time, the space, and the respect to talk about any issues, resolve them, and then move on. Yeah. Yeah. And then from becoming a life coach, I also, like you two, have met wonderful people in your classes. And I met a woman, and she was going through a terrible time with the empty nest, and I had gone through that. So we decided that there were other people that must be experiencing the same thing, and we decided to write a book. And we wrote The Empty Nest Companion.
Oh,
Yeah,
awesome.
Oh, very
that's
cool.
on Amazon. Yeah, that's her. I don't know if you can see that.
Definitely.
Whoop.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that was cool too, doing that. But I can honestly say, I think being a life coach and a manager is a wonderful combination.
I think that that would probably be helpful when your leadership style is the style that you have, which is almost kind of that servant leadership,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because you're really connecting with your employees more on a higher level. So when you have that additional compassion, I think it makes a big difference.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Definitely. I think, Sang-mi, are we coming about maybe to the end of our
Looks like it, yeah.
wrap up questions?
Other things you'd like to share with our listeners, Miss Briget?
I think we covered so many things, and
Yeah.
I'd just like to say that we all have our own journey, and we all get to things in our own time, and go for what inspires you. Do it. You know, get your education and see the world and make a huge difference, because I'm looking at the two of you and the impact that you can make on this world, and it's endless. It's endless. Yeah.
We're trying.
Yes, yes. And then in your own businesses, just always think in your head, how can I be 5 minutes ahead? When I listen to my customer, really listen to them, and then see what their needs are, and kind of be working on those in the background, so that when they finally do ask you for something, you've already got it. And I did that constantly. Yeah. Yeah. And each year, when you get your evaluations, make sure that from the year previously that you've truly grown, that you've taken some education and you've enhanced your skill set and you've made a difference in someone's life that you work with. Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Miss Briget, for coming to Life, but Make It Business.
Thank you very much.